Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is Lisa Pastilli of the Media, Audience, and Contact Marketing Association. Thank you so much for joining us for today's candid conversation regarding what's next in data and technology, a candid conversation with Dennis Hecht of 7 Knots Digital and Joanne Persico of One Count. We'd like to thank our sponsors today, CDS Global and SFG, our diamond level sponsors, and our gold level sponsors, Data Axle, Omida, Lester, Synapse, and Staymates. I'd like to give a mention to our silver sponsors and bronze sponsors, and a thank you again to Joanne and Dennis for their time today. Let's dive in.
I am on the MACMA programming committee, so really excited to be here. I want to thank MACMA for the opportunity, and if anyone has any ideas for future programming events, please reach out. We really try to make sure that we're delivering the best content possible for our audience.
Awesome. I got people already chatting. This is great. Okay, wonderful. So let's start with number 1. And we're going to dive in. We're going to dive into the top 10. And this is obviously a big item that we're hearing a lot about, this whole cookieless future, how DMPs play into this, and the demise of third-party cookies and first-party cookies, which obviously is, I feel like this is a great opportunity for publishers finally, right? Because publishers have all this valuable first-party data. So we're going to just talk a little bit about this. And Dennis, you can dive in at any point in time. I know PAIR is something that you wanted to talk about.
It's interesting, right? Because the cookieless future is now 2024, and I was just reading about PAIR. It's Google's publisher advertiser identity reconciliation solution. It's new. I don't know if anyone's heard about it. It seems like they've got some really big players jumping in. LiveRamp is already signed up, and it's going to support, not only it is going to support digital advertising, but let's also think about that ecosystem as also connected TV. So I think we're really seeing efforts to kind of connect all of the pieces in multiple channels as well. And another thing to think about in cookieless future and DMPs, it'll be interesting to look at participation from companies in the retail space. I was just listening to the gentleman, I can't remember his name. He leads Walmart Connect, and Walmart like 50% of the US shops at Walmart every week. And so that's 150 million people's PII that they have the privilege to have and own and house. And it's going to be ultimately big players that will include a lot of us here on this call who have these large PII data sets. It'll be interesting to see who's going to come together, share data, and think about how are we going to do that in a trustworthy way to kind of shift away from a cookieless future, if that's even possible at all.
Yeah, and there's one other thing I wanted to add is like for a pro tip is because cookies, I mean, everyone's saying, oh, what's really going to happen with cookies? And first-party cookies are not going away. Okay, the internet and your web browsing experience would not function without first-party cookies. So for publishers, I think that's a huge distinction. One pro tip that I would like to share is any partners or vendors that you're working with, third-party players, make sure that they're setting your first-party cookie. They're setting your first-party cookie in your domain. Their cookie in your domain. I think that's super important because a lot of people are saying, "Oh, well, this is going to be a big problem." But if they're setting their cookie in your first-party cookie in your domain, you won't have a problem. So I just wanted to share that quick tip. I know we're monitoring the chat. Anyone want to add anything from the audience? Please feel free to jump in. Otherwise, we'll just jump over to 2, and we could always revisit some of these topics as they come. I guess we timed about 5 minutes per topic just to get to that 50 minutes in. The other thing too, just to go back, for DMPs, what's really interesting is that now you're seeing the convergence of CDPs and DMPs. Some experts think that DMPs will go away only because now with CDPs, we'll go here, with CDPs, there's a lot of crossover. So we'll move over to number 2. I guess we're doing like the David Letterman top 10 countdown, right, Dennis?
Top 10 list.
That's right. This whole customer view. Oh my God, everyone's talking about. It's amazing how many conversations on this 360 single customer view and connecting all these disparate databases. But I have to say, I'm not being self-serving here because we are a CDP. But if you really want to compete in the future and maximize your revenue, you really have to have all your data sources connected and make sure that your partners are all playing nice. Because at the end of the day, if we all need to ingest that data so that you can action on it. Dennis, anything that you wanted to add here?
I think that's right. And I think you're going to continue to see a lot of technology in the data space really evolve here over time. I think we've heard about data warehouses, data lakes, data ponds, data mesh is a new one that I'm following closely, which really is about treating data more as a product and not housing any data inside any of your source applications, but instead using those applications to tap into this centralized data mesh. So lots of big ideas here about how to connect data and how much data to connect and where to connect the data. I think we're going to continue to see that evolve. And I think a lot of it's going to depend on where we're at in our data and digital transformation journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another slide that's kind of related to that. We'll get to that one in number 4, but we're going to talk about email marketing. I think that this is an important, Dennis, I know you're going to share some more insight into this, but email has always been a very viable channel for all publishers. It still is. Most companies, retailers, brands are trying to build email lists, whereas publishers obviously have the leg up of having all this amazing content and e-newsletters and editorial blasts that have been collecting this information. But I know that the Apple iOS has been, I think we've actually talked about this within MACMA. But Dennis, did you want to talk a little bit more?
Yeah, I can share a little bit more here and would love to hear from the audience. This is a pretty intense topic. We all know that Apple Mail has instituted all of their policies now to deliver opens when maybe that Apple Mail email actually wasn't open. And so we're seeing inflated open rates. And I think that is leading to, are we almost 2 years into the post iOS update from iOS, was it iOS 12 or iOS 13? I'm losing track now, but it's interesting to see companies who are trying to adjust metrics according to iOS, I've seen companies that are just accepting higher open rates and just kind of delivering a net new normal. But the biggest challenge and something from a data health standpoint is, are you tracking consistently over time who's engaging, who's opening, who's clicking? Are you getting spam complaints? Are you getting soft bounces, hard bounces? Are you getting opt-outs? Watching decay, watching list fatigue, watching opt-outs over time, and even watching those opens over time, you can actually really start to go into the data and kind of start to pick some of this apart. And I would love to know if anyone's doing any of this. We're certainly digging in quite a bit at 7 Knots Digital on this, where we're seeing databases that are going to be churning at a rate of, up to 30% on an annual basis, because of a lot of things, certainly related to industries and markets, but also related to just paying closer attention to the email marketing side of the house.
Lisa had a question. What are entities with aging databases doing to update them? Any thoughts on that? And I have to say, a lot of people, especially with COVID and people exiting out of the industry, contact information, working from home, not able to, people not getting things in the inbox or even in the snail mail, that was, and then there was another question from Tara, I'm not pronouncing that right. Tara, you can unmute and you can ask a quick question. For our sales folks who have traditionally relied open rates to advertisers, we're starting to leave out open rates and favoring click rate or clicks instead.
Yeah, I was just curious if anybody else is doing some similar to that, or if you are supplying any different metrics to people who want them.
We at Annex, we actually, when this all came around almost 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, Dennis, we actually adjusted our reporting based on the increases that we saw on the initial sort of launch of the new Apple iOS systems. And we are backing out the increased volume numbers so that we have maintained the standard, which is great because we haven't seen that, fluctuation of the reporting on all of the leads and all of the e-blasts that we do. However, for advertisers, when they're seeing competitors' open rates higher than ours, we have to make sure that our sales force understands what that means and that they can go in and say that we've actually adjusted our numbers to reflect a truer version of opens.
Yeah, that's a great point. And like we've realized that a lot of it is an education issue, like you were kind of implying there.
Definitely.
Yeah, and Michael Bennett also clicked, said he routinely cleans the newsletter list based on clicks. And if you don't click on an email in a given time, that you get removed. So I think that's interesting. I have seen publishers where they're actually putting in a footnote saying, 60% of our readers are Apple users, and putting some kind of usage statistic that they're putting as a footnote to letting their advertisers know the number of Apple people on Apple devices. I just thought that was kind of interesting.
From what I've heard, there's another situation where open rates are inflated like that, and that is when you send to an organization where they have a utility that opens all the emails and checks the tracking pixels before the email actually goes out to the individuals. So they sort of pre-screen all the emails. It's a similar thing to what Apple's doing, so that inflates open rates as well.
Great point, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, that also affects click-through rates, and I don't see that too much at Reuters, but I definitely have seen that on the B2B side. And it's about education, right? So when our sales staff goes out, and I have gotten the question about open rates, but if you start talking about the click-through rates, if you start talking more specifically about ad units on the newsletter and what we see in terms of engagement on those, how many people click through that ad that's in the banner at the top or in the middle or whatever it might be, that's really how you get past a lot of this sort of mysticism. I've never been a fan of open rate. I think it's wildly, I think it's a vanity stat. Like when you can say, 30% or 40% of a group does anything, that's like a vanity stat, but it doesn't show us engagement, which from a profession standpoint is what we should all be striving for, is engagement, not merely having, images set to open, images set to download, and you're not even looking at the email. I've opened many an email that's gone straight into my junk box. So
great point, Mike.
I think another thing to think about is most of our customers now aren't just buying single emails anymore. So I would tend to think that a lot of your customers are probably buying packages or some kind of marketing solutions type of package portfolio where you're bundling, and you should probably be bundling your print with various digital efforts, right? You're bundling and you're packaging in banners and emails and social media or video or your Instagram, and you're packaging that up. So when your metrics are going out to your customers, you're looking at that holistically. You're looking at all of those metrics together. So you're really never honing in on that wildly ridiculous 100% open rate, which we actually have on some of our emails that we push aside. Don't look over here. You're kind of looking at the campaign performance in general and that audience reach. So you're kind of you're really changing the whole narrative of what you're speaking to.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Rebecca. You know what I'd love to do is, since we're going to go on to the next 7 topics, Lisa, we'll make a note that it sounds to me like for 2023, we should revisit this specific topic, because it's definitely, newsletters are huge revenue streams for publishers, and we should definitely continue on this discussion. But I love it. Thank you so much, everybody. We're going to move on to number 4. And you're hearing more now about this term ID graphing. Okay, I personally wanted to bring this up because you're going to hear more about identity resolution, device IDs, mobile IDs, connected data. And I just wanted to put out there the definition, because a lot of people don't know what an ID graph is. And so just imagine this is your database that's stitching all your customer records from all your data sources, your channels, your devices to create that unified customer profile. There's going to be a lot more talk about identity graphs in the future. So we just wanted to put this one in there. This kind of also connects a little bit with CDPs, which are the ones who are doing it right, are creating an ID graph. Anybody else want to comment? Dennis, I don't know if you wanted to comment anything else here.
I was just going to jump in here with this is something to pay really close attention to. It's extremely important when it comes to applying, doing activations with your CDP, because typically the underlying framework is an identity graph. I would just be asking a lot of questions about how this is put together if you're not already. Things like, what happens if an email is forwarded to another person and then they click on that email? How does that impact my identity graph? Am I over merging? Am I under merging? What are the pros and cons to that? I would really spend a lot of time thinking about that. And then also another piece that's really important in here is standardization of data and normalization of data, so that are Bill and William the same person, or are they not? And is Ashley Furniture and Ashley Home Store and Ashley Inc., are those the same companies or not? It just has so many systemic impacts when we think about personalization, but then also account-based marketing solutions that we're delivering to customers. So I'd be curious if anyone had other thoughts on this or is encountering any of those roadblocks.
Yeah, Dennis, I think you make some very important points, is that when people get too aggressive about trying to match a profile to an email address, it's very easy to merge records incorrectly. And you have to think about that carefully. But what it really all comes down to is planning things based on use cases, not looking at data for data's sake, but to say, okay, here's the use case. In this use case, does it really matter if we get the email address wrong, right? Mm-hmm. So all those things you're talking about stitching together identities, those are all real important issues. But in some use cases, who cares? If you're going after people who are interested in a certain topic, for example, to display ads, mm-hmm. and you get 5% of them wrong, it really doesn't matter. But in other cases, it matters a whole lot.
And it matters. That's a good point. It matters then how that impacts where that data is used upstream and downstream by use case too. Because I've seen people over merge and then want to undo that merge in another system, and then you're handcuffed. But I love it. Think use case first. Yep.
Perfect. Wonderful. So let's, we've covered this topic at MACMA, metaverse and NFTs, and we're seeing obviously we're seeing a tremendous on the gaming and VR front with luxury brands and Gucci and a ton of them. Actually, my son's a perfect example. Oh, mom, I have to buy, Fortnite currency so I can get these great Nike sneakers and the skin. And, we're seeing all of these luxury brands, but I thought this was really interesting for NFT examples. These were three that that Dennis and I found. Vogue Singapore actually did some NFT covers, generated $38,000 in revenue. I think that's actually one of the NFTs where they had handbag in Vogue. They had handbags, and I think this is even like the graphic that might have been auctioned off for this NFT. Fortune recently auctioned off some limited NFT covers and raised $1.3 million. And Time NFT covers sold at auction at $435,000. So I know we have B2B publishers on the call. Is anybody exploring, besides consumer brands, anyone else exploring the concepts of metaverse, putting that into your operations or NFTs within publishing? I'm just curious. I thought these were three interesting examples. Got a couple people shaking their heads no. I think we're really trying to see like where this fits in with the publishers. I was at the Digital Summit in Fort Lauderdale this Monday and Tuesday, and one of the directors of Meta presented, and when she was talking about the metaverse in a B2B context, it was really interesting, not so much on like how we would monetize it for like publishing, but talking about how with people being virtual and offices now not going back to the office, using metaverse to connect disparate teams from one location to another in a metaverse. So creating virtual offices and mixed VR. I think it was Dennis, it was mixed. It wasn't, it's what she was saying is that there's going to be a convergence of AR and VR.
Yeah.
But anyway,
yeah, and Greg kind of posted a comment that augmented reality is going to be bigger. It's certainly taking off more quickly as well. I got one of my first emails this week from a company that I follow closely, and their CEO was 3D in my email holding a VIP badge with my name on it. Cool. And it was like, Dennis, heck, join this event. And it was like flashing in front of me. And it was the coolest thing I have seen in email marketing this year. So I think we're just going to keep seeing more of that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. That's what a great example. So I think we'll see more. I think we have, it's just the tip of the iceberg, more on the consumer side. So it'll be interesting what happens within B2B. We'll see what happens within B2B. So number 6, we put machine learning. Machine learning, I think we've talked about this. What does this truly mean? Are we seeing this more predictive segments in creating personas, data insights? For us, like for CDP, we use machine learning for content recommendations to drive engagement, page views, etc. We put this on the list. Dennis, did you want to add anything here for ML?
Yeah, I wonder what people like, what kind of applications people are seeing here, but there's so many that I think even extend into like understanding purchase propensity, understanding subscription propensity, and that just spills in, it's going to spill into like real-time targeting, where I don't think we're going to be spending as much time building our own audience segments anymore, because I think we're just going to have a lot of automation running in the background that's going to be serving audience up to us in real time based on behavior.
100%. We're seeing that now. We're doing that now within our client base, and I think the more automation, I agree, Dennis. It's going to be even easier for marketers to take these insights. Fantastic. Okay, perfect. So we're going to move on to number 7, because this is related. artificial intelligence. And we kind of separated this out because there's a whole new, I wouldn't say it's new, but we're seeing more on AI content generation, content bots. And here are just like 3 examples how Miami Herald has a bot that writes real estate stories and bangs out like 50 bylines and 4 articles each month or each day for each day, and how the AP and the Los Angeles Times are using bots to create content without a human, where they're able to take third-party data. I know with the Miami Herald, they have a data source that has real estate transactions within Florida, and they're able to generate these articles without a human. So we put this in here. I don't know if anyone else wants to add. Anyone using these types of AI content bots? AI content generation?
We don't use content bots, but we do use machine learning to organize what content is curated to a certain extent, and help us to sort of understand what the audience wants to see more of. So it's not a content bot, but it's very closely related, it's interesting with some of this content bots. I mean, it works well in the financial, so I see down there with quarterly earnings and things like that. Sometimes, and it's gotten a lot better, but sometimes it can be really off-putting if it's done incorrectly. And from an engagement perspective, it can be a minefield. But definitely artificial intelligence and machine learning, especially Dennis, you talked a little bit about knowing who your audience is. When you've got tens of millions of people coming to a website each month and you have a relatively small registration database, you don't know the large portion of people that are coming to your site. But through machine learning and through doing some smart work with some data partners, you can extend that reach, and that helps you in advertising, that helps you in content creation, and that helps you in obviously building audiences, and even marketing. So understanding who is at your site, who do you want to get more of in terms of people.
Yeah, well said, Michael.
I was going to say too, like really well said. I think we're going to just see so much more of that with like tying this back even to like cookieless, is I think contextual understanding of our anonymous audience is going to become even more important than, to some extent, understanding PII, or at least in balance, those things are going to become equally important.
Yeah, and I see that Greg, you had put out that a friend recommends Jasper, and someone said that they're looking into it, AI, but have not gotten there quite yet. I think that there's a ton of tools. I was at a conference, and there's companies coming out of Israel and out of the UK and all different parts of the world that are creating these modules that can just do AI functions that I thought, wow, this is really fascinating, and do revenue share, not even a huge revenue commitment, because they're banking on a revenue share model and things like that. So I think that there'll be more. Or is anyone using content bots or customer service bots for answering questions on, your subscription, customer service, and using any AI type stuff for that? Okay, yeah, we're seeing a little bit more. That's funny. We'll move on to number 8. Privacy. I think we're going to be on this one a little bit longer. This is, security, privacy, GDPR. Now there's already 5 states that have jumped onto their own state laws. And
I was going to jump in there really quick,
go for it.
Because before someone else does and say there's more than 5 states, there are way more than 5 states. I was just looking at an updated map today of current legislation, and I believe we have legislation passed in 11 states.
Wow.
Or if I'm not misspoken. And the better stat is that only 13 of the 50 states have not put legislation in front of their government. So that tells you where we're probably going to be in 12 months from now, that there'll be 37 states with legislation and 13 without, and those 13 others will likely be following closely behind unless we do get some federal support in here at some point. I'm not sure if that's the best solution or not, but this is gonna be a really big one, really important one. And Joanne, I think we were talking earlier, there's a whole new set of companies emerging in this space, tracking like cookie consent and e-consent, right?
Yes, One Trust,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it is, and you're right. I mean, what I think about the usability, just from my background, I think about the usability. How many times do you get to a set website? Like, are you a California resident? I'm like, no. I'm like, what are we gonna do? Are you a Florida resident? Or what are we gonna have? How are we gonna manage this user journey, this user experience? It's gonna get really crazy. And you're right. There are vendors who are trying to to manage e-consent, but it gets even trickier with e-consent, because just think about it. As a publisher, you have Google Ad Manager, you have Google Analytics, you're tracking behavior, then you have your webinar vendors, your event vendors. Who's going to be managing all of these consents? Because all these consents a lot of times sits in these separate platforms. Yes, CDP can absolutely help with that, with a global unified profile center and managing that relationship. But you're right, it is, because this is just the tip of, I just see it as the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, Greg just posted, how will you rely on it when people use VPNs and you can't rely on geolocation? I think that's exactly right. I think we are gonna have to have some more of these banners pop up. And because there's so many banners, I was just reading that the trend is on the increase that people are hitting reject cookies and reject on all of these things, upwards of like 50%, and it's climbing. So there's going to be some really, really big impacts here again, potentially bigger than cookieless when we think about e-consent.
And I think what people forget too is, I don't know about you guys, but my budget gets out of control with how many times I have to send contracts to legal for review. Did you send them your GDPR consent? Did you send them your privacy policy? Did you send them this document? Every time I do vendor vetting, it's like I have to tack on like 3 extra weeks to go through the whole privacy and GDPR and are you a processor, a data processor or not? And then every single time they won't sign my form, or I have to sign their forms, and then a lawyer has to get involved. And it's like, it's not cheap. And so my budget keeps going, out of control. And then next year I have to budget in more money, and then everybody's yelling at me, why's your budget so high? I'm like, it's legal fees. And no one ever thinks about that. The legal fees you have to tack on for all of your contract vetting. It's so painful. And even on the sales side, because your salespeople, if your clients aren't signing your own terms and conditions, which, okay, whoever wants to do that, and they want you to sign like Royal Caribbean's or Norwegian Cruise Lines, you have to go vet all their T's and C's. Yeah, you gotta send that out as well. Ka-ching, ka-chang, people.
No, that's a great point, Roberta. We, and our contracts, we are a sub-processor of the data, and you're right. And as your vendor, you have to cross your T's and dot your I's, because especially with like third-party data append, I have to say, a lot of times we're like, okay, this is great. This is your first-party data. They've opted in with you. You have a relationship with them. And then it's like, well, wait a second. You're getting all this data appended from, who is this? How did they get that data? Where did they get that data? How is that merging in with you? And they have not opted in for e-consent. It is a wild roller coaster.
Right. And don't forget about breach, everybody, because no one ever thinks about that. No one ever says, because you may, get through all of that. You have to always remember, you never know when there's going to be a breach on your vendor side, or God forbid on your side. But, it's okay when Facebook gets a breach, it's like, okay, when, all the big vendors breach and all of our data just goes out into the ethernet, think about how many times our data has been just tossed out there. Doesn't matter, but like, look at your slide right now. I mean, publishers just get fined, right? So if there's a breach of contract with a vendor that you use, you have to really think about that when you're signing these contracts. It's really important. Okay.
Hey,
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the complexity of it is mind-boggling. And the example I always use, because I spent probably 5 months getting a company compliant for GDPR, and read that stupid legislation, 39 pages, more than I'd care to mention. And it what's really complex about it, you talk about VPN, the way the law is actually written, unless they've amended it, but I don't think they have, it's actually based on a UK citizenship, right? Or not UK anymore, right? But like, just say you're in France. But let's say you're in France and you're doing work in the US. You are still, GDPR still applies to that person. Now, that may not happen very often, but it's usually the high profile cases that have those sort of outliers that you have to be concerned about. I mean, at Reuters, obviously, we're an international company. I mean, we have a presence in 180 countries. I mean, just, it's massive problem, not problem for us, but it's a massive issue for us. I think it's probably employed half of our legal team, because of this. And it does impact things. It was mentioned before that it impacts not only budgets and contracts, but, how we have to, when we're doing our paid media campaigns, how we have to run those. And we have to make sure that, we can't take it on Facebook's word with what they do with the information they come from tracking pixels. When we're doing retargeting, or we're doing some of this other fantastic work we're doing. So it's really complex. It's really important. I hope, frankly, that they get to a level of a federal law as opposed to having to worry about each different state, because we get too much more than, the 10 states or so that are currently in process. It's just going to get ridiculous to manage. It's going to be impossible. So then you're going to get people that won't manage it at all, really.
That's an excellent point. And Dennis also posted an article. I'm not sure if people know, but in the chat, there's 3 little dots on the bottom of the chat, and you could just hit that, and there's a save chat function. I think that's the case. It should be. Okay, perfect, fantastic. Because there's some great resources and great conversations that you may want to go back. I know we are doing a recording based on the demand for this specific topic, for this specific event. But anyway, I think we're going to go ahead and move on, and we're doing great for timing, because there's a slide where we're going to jump into like, what's the next trends. So we put you had mentioned, we didn't even put a social slide in here. And Mike Bennett, you had mentioned social and Facebook, and we could have had a whole slide on social and TikTok and how publishers are monetizing TikTok. And I think what we'll want to do is save that for a whole nother topic in 2023. Because I think with social media, a lot of the publishers are already doing paid campaigns. I know we track paid campaigns and social and organic campaigns. And then we actually report who on social looked at those campaigns and report it. But I think that should be a topic for 2023, because with Discord, there's so many new channels now for communications, Discord. And I was talking on my Bold Minds, one of the publishers that does books. He was telling me how staggering most of his sales comes from TikTok for book sales in his organization. So there's some unbelievable things that are happening within social. And so I think we're going to table that, but I want to talk about 9. I think paywalls and metering. This is not new, right? But we are seeing great conversions. We're seeing modals. We're seeing all these different types of marketing tactics with paywalls and metering. So we wanted to put this one in. Dennis, did you want to hop in? I had a couple of additional thoughts too with paywalls and metering, because I think just one last thought is for consumer publishers, they've been doing it forever, right? New York Times and so forth. But what we're seeing more on the B2B side is the option of doing more membership models or metering to get more audience data, more audience acquisition, and so forth. So I just wanted to point that out, that it's not even just paywalls, but you could use metering as a tactic for audience growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just say, add to this, I think we're going to see tons of new vendors, more new vendors in the space. There's already a plethora of them and new ones all the time, but I think Get Prepared, there's going to be even more. And I think they're going to start attacking other channels too. Like, I think you're going to start seeing like a meter inside mobile messaging. And I think you're going to see it inside of connected TV. I think it's going to present a little bit differently, but it's definitely, we're going to see a lot more of this type of strategy in other channels.
Yeah. You know, it's really neat about paywalls and metering. And I'm thinking back a couple of slides to AI. There are a few companies out there, one I'm intimately aware of, that actually uses dynamic paywalls and dynamic metering, where, you know, it's not like, oh, everybody who sees 3 articles, then you have to pay. And what's really cool about some of this technology is they not only will sort of adjust who sees how many articles, but based on what the publisher or the media, you know, company wants to do, they will also then create cohort groups that are most likely to convert, right? So and they look at behaviors across your whole site. So, you know, it's really becoming a lot more intelligent, these paywalls and these meterings. It's not just the static, you know, 3 and you're out. And, you know, I don't know for a fact, but you know, companies like Wall Street Journal, New York Times, you know, The Economist, Financial Times, they're all using some form of dynamic or variable paywall. It's smart business because, you know, you let certain people in so you can keep your advertising dollars stable. And then you close the door to other people who are more likely than not, or more likely than the next guy or gal to pay. So it's fascinating stuff. I mean, I didn't even know these kinds of things existed. So, you know, it was really interesting.
They do.
For the past, you know, couple of months going through that, living in the world a little bit, or in that world anyways.
I just wanted to add just one, I will jump on whoever was talking, but I've certainly talked to publishers where they said, Joanne, we want to create an ad-free, we're going to charge more for our paywall and our metering, and it's going to be an ad-free experience. And they're changing their revenue model for ad-free. So I just wanted to add that. And someone did jump in. I don't know who that was.
I think it might have been me. I was just going to say, we actually launched all of our, what we call our content meters. We started back in March with one publication and we piloted that. It's basically within a month, if anybody has come in as an unknown or as a non-subscribing person to either my print magazine or to my newsletter or any digital properties, that they get the content meter, and it ends up being a hard meter. And when we piloted it with the first publication, we saw, I think it was like 40% increase in email acquisition, and we're in Canada, so email acquisition is a big deal to us. It's very, very difficult to get prospect emails. I've managed to grow my overall email database in less than a year by at least 40%, which is huge for us. And
tremendous.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was one of these things where our platform just allowed us to do the metering, so we thought we'd just try it on one. We watched the web analytics very closely to make sure that we weren't seeing a drop in our unknown traffic in any sense. We never saw any real, you know, issues or risk to the traffic on the sites, and we rolled it out to our other 65 magazines, and they continue to run right now. So technically, I've always been a believer of getting people when they're interacting with you to try and get them to subscribe, and that I think has proven true in that pilot, that, you know, when people are there, they're going to read the content. That's when they're more willing to provide that information. Interestingly enough, even though there's technically 4 gates that fire, all of the response came in on either the first one or the last one. So the people are willing to adopt very quickly or they're ignoring until they get that last one saying, you're not going to get to see any more of our content until you give us your information and subscribe to our newsletter. So it's proven very, very well.
Vesna, thank you for sharing that. I think that was a great example of how you're seeing audience growth. One of the things I just want to add for a pro tip is make sure you're really looking carefully at your analytics. We had a client that, it's interesting, we had a client that was using 5 articles for their gating. And once they started looking into our analytics, they were like, wait a second, our average session is two pages, 2.5. So they changed their metering rule to 3 and immediately pushed more people into the paywall. They saw a 30% growth in subscriptions in 30 days.
Yeah.
Because now they were really, I would just say is make sure you're really carefully looking at your analytics, that you're not giving too much or too little. That's all I wanted to say for a pro tip.
And oddly enough, the people that were coming in through Engage were actually proving to engage 17% more regularly than our standard audience. So it was a win-win-win in that sense.
Beautiful. Love that. Anybody else? Roberta, have you tried anything like that for North Star?
We do a lot of modals. We don't put up hard walls yet, but we do tons of modals across events, across newsletters, across voting, for awards, anywhere we can, which seem to work out well for capturing new audience, for engagement, for re-engagement campaigns,
Beautiful.
for audience acquisition, just to try and, because we do have the MPP issue with Apple, right? So we are trying to kind of increase where we can new audience members into the database.
Perfect. We're going to go ahead and move into 10. And these are great. This is great conversation too, because this will certainly help us for MACMA to determine what do we want to continue and what trends do we want to continue, which leads us to number 10. Yay, yay, yay. We're at number 10. So what's next? I think we talked a little bit about some trends, and we appreciate everybody jumping in on this call. I'm just thrilled, I have to say, because there's so many times where people are like, I'm too shy to unmute. And so this has been a dynamic conversation, but what's next? One of the trends that Dennis and I said, hey, did you hear so-and-so B2B publisher is now a marketing agency, and they're extending all of their services to now their clients, and they are the official marketing agency. That was just one. I'd love to hear from you guys. Yeah, hey, what's next? And Lisa's like, let's hear it. 3 exclamations. Anybody want to jump in?
Please.
New trends.
Well, we're doing a bit of that whole being, the agency on behalf of clients being that one-stop shop source. And we're finding that we do have some leverage as far as that goes because of our first party data. Somebody can't just go to an agency and get the same offerings that we're offering our clients. And, we have the omnichannel and programmatic that works with our first party, our own owned and operated sort of sites and everything. And the other thing that we're just in the process right now, just launching, is our content studio, which is going to look at, really working with some of the larger based clients and being able to build their content, but also being able to market their content in a much more cohesive way, and much more of that agency kind of hand-holding and working as partners with the clients from a print and digital offering side of things, and packaging, a lot of new digital only products that we're offering, and grouping those from lead generation products to branding products and everything in between.
Oh, that's awesome. I think content marketing is like a whole topic in itself. There were a lot of topics at Digital Summit on content marketing, because a lot of the brands don't have the people to produce the content and how to put it out and what channels to put it out. So Vesna, just that fact that you're right. We have all that expertise. We have the editors, right? We have all those teams. I think content marketing is certainly another one. Anything else? Any other ideas?
Well, I just wanted to echo what Vesna said about Content Studio. Maybe give a plug for Reuters Plus, who's been around and doing excellent work. It's funny because, even these big companies, I mean, multinational, multi-billion dollar companies still struggle to market themselves, which I've never understood, but they do, and I'm happy they do, because then we can offer them a service. So it's really becoming more of a consultant to some of your larger clients, and really having an end-to-end solution that can include anything from display advertising to custom content, whether it's broadcast solutions or podcasts, all the way down to even custom newsletters. And just one thing about newsletters, I know, when people think of newsletters, at least when I do, I keep thinking of pulp and paper newsletter that used to come out from Miller Freeman years and years ago. I think there needs to be a rebirth and a rethinking of newsletters. I don't think many publishers do them quite effectively. And I think it starts with, just as a thought to leave with, that what do you want your newsletter to do? Like, do you want it to drive traffic? Do you want it to be a thing unto itself? Is it an advertising vehicle or what? And I think a lot of folks just put things out because they feel they need to, and they don't have a clear direction of what the newsletter is supposed to do. So we've spent a lot of time over the last 6 months at Reuters answering those various questions of what do we want each of our touch points to our audience do. And newsletters is a big part of that, and it's a growing part of that, not just for our advertising solutions, but for our readers, our audience. So it's kind of an old idea, but it's like Coke Classic, right? It was
Yeah,
old
no.
and then it was new again.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that too, Mike, because what we're seeing on our end is everyone has always been, oh, what's the user experience? But they've never created VIP experiences for their advertisers. So for us, like, we have the ability to do automated dashboards for advertisers where they get a feed of their data directly into their Salesforce, Tableau, Power BI, and they're looking for VIP experiences too. And I think there's going to be more emphasis on that across all the different channels. I did want to, just because we have a couple minutes left, I wanted to just key takeaways. And Dennis, I put this list together, right? Because one of the things that we talked about is get your house in order, have access to that data, make sure that your teams are in that mindset of there's a huge cultural, well, I'd say this, we talked about data silos, there's also culture silos. So make sure that you have all those business objectives married across all of your different teams, hiring the right talent. Dennis, you could certainly, right, we talked about, so especially with 7 Knots Digital, you guys are very analytics focused, and they're a great partner of ours with One Count. Making sure that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be data scientists, make sure that you have tools where even your marketing people, your circulation people can read and understand the analytics. And I'd say budget for new technologies, chatbots, CDP, machine learning. And the last one, Dennis, you might want to add a couple more. Don't be afraid to try things. If you need to start small, but make sure that you're maintaining that trust and compliancy and transparency in front of your readers and clients, advertisers, sponsors. Anything else, Dennis? Just a couple takeaways.
I think that's right. I think a lot of this also ties back to like education. Don't be afraid to be the educator and help other people with their data and digital literacy, because everyone's at a different point in the spectrum. So I think a lot of people are going to ask for help, and the more we can be proactive on that front, I think the more successful you'll be.
Wonderful. Any other last takeaways? Any other thoughts before we are on time? We did top 10 and we're on time. Any other final thoughts? Make sure to save the chat. We're going to definitely take feedback and put that into the, Dennis is right here from programming, so I know he'll be busy with that. Any other final thoughts? I hope this session was a great one and that there were some great takeaways.
I think you guys did an amazing job. Does anybody have anything else? And I just want to recap a little bit from the beginning. So I want to thank all of you for being here today. It's been an amazing session with great ideas, and we're so grateful. And again, MACMA, where the conversation happens, is our hashtag. Hopefully you guys can see this. Again, the holiday party is December 1st at the Hearst Tower. And we want to thank Dennis and Joanne today for everything and such an amazing presentation. We're very, very lucky to have them with us. And again, please renew your subscription or membership today. And of course, thanks to our sponsors, CDS Global, SFG, Data Axle, Amita, Lester, Synapse, and Staymates, and our silver and bronze level sponsors. Thank you. www.themacma.org. Everything is there. And we look forward to seeing you all next month when we have a town hall. And that's going to be a hot topic one. And I look forward to all of you being there. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Joanne,
Have a
Dennis,
great
great
rest of the
job.
day.
Thank you so much.
Have a good
Enjoy
weekend.
the weekend. Play some pickleball.
Going
Take
to.
care, everyone.
Yeah, teach me.
Bye, everybody. Thank
Fantastic.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.